There's a lot of people up in arms recently about woke games. I made a video about it a little while ago, and it's by far the most watched video on my channel. I know 5,500 views isn't much by YouTube standards, but by Centigraph standards, it's impressive. Anyway, everyone loved that video, so I figured I'd stick with the theme. That's not really why I want to make this one, though. I want to make this one because it's clear that people are disappointed with the games industry right now. While that video did garner both hateful and encouraging comments, a different type of comment I received for that video stood out. These comments tended to go on in great length about what woke means to that particular commenter, and often those comments were some version of how if a game is woke, that means the developer spends more time pandering to a far-left crowd than they do to making a game good. Putting aside the fact that I addressed that in the video, this made it obvious to me that people recognize video games these days are often uninspired, unoriginal, and bland. They're just pointing the finger at the wrong cause for these bland games. The varying definitions of what woke even means showed me that people really just figure out they don't want to like something first, then try and figure out how that thing is woke. As I explained in that video, most often the label is applied to games with pro-LGBTQ+ messaging, but in the comments I got a lot more definitions, including one that straight up admitted that woke just means things they don't like. I have no idea if this was meant to be satire. It seems to me that people first decide they don't like something, then declare it to be woke. In other words, the definition is nebulous, and even the people who use it don't really know what it means. And all that, to me, points to the idea that people recognize there's something wrong with games. They recognize there's something they don't like. But I don't think that games are more woke than they had been previously. In other words, there is something wrong with video games and the industry that makes them, but it's not wokeness. It's something real and much more difficult to define. Before we get started, just a quick note on the footage I'll be playing during this video. If I don't have anything related to show, then instead I'll be showing gameplay footage of some of my favorite indie games from 2025. I'll only be showing the first 5 or 10 minutes of the game, so it will be very spoiler light, but I did want to let you know. I'll be putting the names of the games in the corner, so if you have any questions about them, I would love to talk about them. Just ask me in the comments. With the exception of the game Routine, I've played through and beat them all, at least on an initial playthrough, and I've loved them. Routine I've only just started since it came out recently, and I've really liked it so far, though like I said I haven't beat it yet, so who knows, maybe I'll change my mind by the end. On with the video. In the last decade, especially since the COVID epidemic, it's become a trend to recognize something is wrong and then blame that on a conspiracy. There's something comforting in being able to point to a thing and declare, there's the thing that's wrong, and even more reassuring to then point at the nebulous they for the people who are causing it. Do you think too many people are on medication? It's gotta be those chemtrails released from planes in an evil government plot to keep us reliant on them. Climate change? Actually, that's a bunch of wealthy science people who want to stop people from using plastic by using a secret weather-controlling machine to make hurricanes and scare us into believing in climate change. And I'm not going to go into all the plentiful racist, transphobic, anti-Semitic, and/or misogynistic conspiracy theories out there. Of course, conspiracy theories did not suddenly sprout up in the last 10 years, but our always online culture has made access to these readily available conspiracy theories more ubiquitous. It's easy to find flat earth videos once you've already seen one. Your teachers must be lying to you. I mean, what's easier, reading a bunch of long books and studies in an attempt to understand the dangers of climate change, or just finding a bunch of internet dudes yelling about secret government plots? Regardless of the conspiracy, the origin is similar. The recognition that something is wrong, which leads to a search for the causes, and that search can often lead to the loudest and angriest people because they're the ones that get views. Also, what they're yelling is way more convenient to believe, and since it often doesn't require any proof, just a vague insinuation that they don't want you to know the truth, it's tailor-made for easy consumption and viral spread. But we've got to do better. In a year where America's president can blame DEI initiatives for a tragic plane crash, we've got to start demanding proof and not just latching on to the latest thing we heard. I mean, this president gutted the leadership of the Transportation Security Administration, the TSA, and the most recent top official of the Federal Aviation Administration stepped down after a clash with Trump ally and out and proud Nazi Elon Musk, and wasn't replaced until after a deadly crash in January 2025. Those sound way more plausible as having something to do with the crash than DEI initiatives. What does this all have to do with video games? Generally, I see this urge to blame woke games as reminiscent of the impulse to blame something new and easy, rather than spend time trying to find the actual cause. Specifically, the recent pushback towards anything DEI related has seeped into gaming discourse, and the urge to blame DEI for anything and everything infects everything. But can something as simple as pro-LGBTQ+ messaging, or gay, or even polyamorous relationships, or black protagonists really be the underlying cause of failure in the video game industry? In 2023, the consulting studio Sweet Baby Incorporated found themselves in the middle of controversy. Gonna put that word in quotes here. Okay, that's better. Controversy. Sweet Baby Incorporated is a company hired by game studios to help with representation in games. They encourage studios to write characters and stories in ways that are authentic and creative, with an emphasis on sensitivity to marginalized groups. At some point, someone got it into their head that actually what Sweet Baby does is kick down studio doors and force them to make their game's protagonist black and trans at gunpoint. That's an exaggeration, sure, but it's closer to what people were saying about them than what it is they actually do. People treated Sweet Baby Inc. as if they were just single-handedly destroying games. So let's look at some of the games the company worked on. Sable. I haven't played it, but I've heard great things. God of War Ragnarok. Incredible game with fantastic story and characters that was nominated for the Game of the Year. Alan Wake 2. I can't gush enough about this game. It was also nominated for Game of the Year. Suicide Squad. Haven't played it, but I've heard bad things. Shadow Gambit, The Cursed Crew. I love this game, and it reviewed well. Dungeons & Dragons Dark Alliance. Sadly, not a great game. Too bad. Goodbye Volcano High. Never heard of it, but a quick search shows that it reviewed really well. Gotham Knights. Haven't played it, but it's not supposed to be that great. There's a lot more, but this list and the complete list on Wikipedia shows that they have worked on games that sold and reviewed well and not so well. It's clear here that Sweet Baby Inc. is not some industry-destroying SWAT team that signals the video game apocalypse, but they are a consulting firm that some studios decide to work with. The Sweet Baby controversy seems to be mostly over, though. There are still those who harp on about it, but the anti-DEI crowd seems to have moved on to a broader target. Games labeled woke. The most generous definition of woke, when it's used by quote-unquote gamers, is that it means absolutely nothing. A lot of people in the comments of my previous video wrote quite a bit about how the term actually means the game designers are forcing progressive ideas down our throats, or that they're spending more time on making games woke than they are with making games fun, completely ignoring that the main example I used in the video, Avowed, had not yet been released. Therefore, how can anyone say they're shoving an agenda down anyone's throat when they have no idea what the game's story will contain? And Avowed is not the only example of these arguments being made before the release of a game. I made the argument that woke is actually a term that just means a game has LGBTQ+ characters or themes, and so people who yell that wokeness is destructive are just trying to avoid active transphobia by adding layers to the transphobia. But why is this even such a major concern in the first place? Why are there dozens of videos made by screaming men who are so angry by these so-called woke games? Why can't they just shrug, say these are not the games they want to play, and then move on to something that they do want to play? I mean, for the people making the videos, it's because the outrage gets them clicks. But then there are the fans who are convinced that this really is an issue that requires immediate attention, or games are doomed. Why? How are woke games and woke game developers and woke games journalists so powerful as to bring down the entire video game industry? I mean, the short answer is they aren't. But even so, there's a lot of people who are convinced that they do have that power. So again, why? I think it's because there actually is something wrong with the games industry, and wokeness is a convenient scapegoat. Like so many things with the world, it's easy to see that something's wrong. but much more difficult to discuss the reasons behind what's wrong. We, as a species, tend to gravitate towards easy explanations. That's part of what draws people to games in the first place. If I'm having a lot of trouble against a particular boss, I need to figure out patterns, learn how to react, and eventually I'll solve my problem, hopefully. Even in board games, if there's a dispute or something you're unsure about, there are rules to examine and find your answer. But obviously, that doesn't apply to real life. If you have a problem with your significant other, there's no set of rules to make things better. No predetermined outcome where everyone's happy. But that doesn't stop us from looking for those easy solutions. And saying that games are too woke these days is that easy solution to what's wrong with the games industry. We see studios failing, developers being laid off in the thousands, and games that by any other metric are successful, but because so much money and time has been poured into a game as CEOs look for the next big thing, they're technically considered failures, even after selling millions of copies. I mean, Dragon Age Veilguard sold 1.5 million copies at the time of writing this, but developer BioWare had to lay off hundreds. That number is a bit nebulous. I've seen up to 3 million or even below a million, but 1.5 million is the most common. In any case, can we really blame lower than expected sales numbers on characters using the term non-binary? To an extent, I guess we can. There are a certain amount of people who will refuse to buy a game just because it has trans characters. But I'd argue we should blame those people and not the fact that a game has trans characters. These are not people who have come to a nuanced and thoughtful judgment after careful examination of the story. They're people who have drawn a line in the sand and refused to play any game in which a trans or non-binary character exists. Even so, Veilguard was bought, played, and enjoyed by a lot of people, but it's still considered a failure. According to a Polygon article, Electronic Arts CEO Andrew Wilson and the rest of Electronic Arts leadership didn't just expect Dragon Age the Veilguard to sell on par with the inevitable competition or even slightly above average. They expected it to be a huge, immediate hit. And they didn't just expect it, they budgeted for it. Even though the entire year of other comparable RPGs leading up to Veilguard proved the unlikelihood of this, those expectations didn't change. And then, unsurprisingly, Veilguard failed to meet them. I'll admit here that I wasn't a fan either. I don't want this to be the one thing people hang on to and comment on, but nothing about Veilguard really gripped me. And I only played for around 20 hours, so I never even got to the point where Tosh reveals their backstory. Of course, I never really had been a Dragon Age fan to begin with. I played Origins on release and felt ambivalent about it. I have tried on times to play through again, but never can make it too far. I tried Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition and wasn't able to finish those games either. They seem like they should be right up my alley, but I think I have to admit that Dragon Age games just aren't for me. But I've spoken too much about Dragon Age now. The real point I wanted to make about the game is that many people did enjoy it. It reviewed well, and we'll get to that, and it's somehow still a failure. A failure which prompted Electronic Arts CEO Andrew Wilson to claim that the lack of live service features is what tanked Dragon Age. Of course, this is after BioWare's live service game Anthem failed, which led to pulling back from live service elements in the first place. And of course, Veilguard is not the only example of a game selling millions and still being considered a failure. Square Enix is especially guilty of this. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Final Fantasy XVI were both considered disappointments, initially anyway. I think after they were released on PC, the game's sales numbers were much better. But even as far back as 2013, the rebooted Tomb Raider game, which sold 3.4 million copies in its first month, was dubbed a disappointment. And I think these stories are important because they're a microcosm of what I do think is wrong with the games industry. And wokeness is not one of those things. Let's start with game reviewers. A fairly common comment I received on my previous video was that game reviewers were untrustworthy shills who were paid to write good reviews for games. The statement is quite a claim and one that requires proof. And proof is not that games you don't like have reviewed well, but apparently, that's all people think they need. And if that kind of thing is actually happening, it's certainly not the fault of individual reviewers. No game company is figuring out who at a publication will be reviewing a game, contacting that reviewer, and offering to pay them to say nice things. No, if this kind of thing is happening, then game companies are making deals with people higher up the ladder than writers, and those people then give a directive to the writers. But again, as far as I'm aware, there's no proof this kind of thing is happening. And since reviews are subjective, it's perfectly fine if a reviewer likes a game that I or you don't like, and vice versa. And there is certainly not some conspiracy to rate so-called woke games highly while the base games get lambasted. If you want to say that, you've got to prove it. I am aware that some publications, maybe all publications, lean towards being favorable with games because then they print guides and help and those kinds of things, so they don't want to rate these games too low because then more people will not buy the game. So there is a little bit of a skew, I think. But again, there is not some kind of a conspiracy for reviewers to only review woke games well. A bit of a late edit here. Thanks to Madular's video on Two Worlds, I was made aware of a publisher Topware's laundry list of shady practices. I'd highly recommend watching the video, really though I'd be surprised if anyone watching this one wasn't already aware of him. In this video, he discusses this Destructoid article from 2011. In it, they discuss allegations against Topware that include European reviewers have accepted ad buys from Topware in exchange for favorable reviews. Topware was caught by IGN attempting to influence the rating score of IGN's game stats and inflating Two Worlds 2 rankings. Game Reactor was pressured to take down its Two Worlds 2 review because it used preview code to write it. The rub is that more favorable reviews released at the same time as Game Reactors were not asked to remove their reviews, despite being based on the same code. Topware employees have been writing Amazon reviews, posting YouTube accounts, and posting elsewhere as members of the public to generate positive feedback on its own products. Threats of legal action against one reviewer were made without the permission of management and rest entirely on the head of PR department. The reviewer was accused of pirating a copy of Two Worlds 2 for his negative review despite having been sent code. Destructoid itself was planned to be approached with a bribe. Topware paid for a Two Worlds 2 site skin, but withheld half the pay. The other half was allegedly planned to be paid in exchange for an 8.5 out of 10 review from us. I don't really think this changes my point about reviewers, but I wanted to address it because I have a feeling people who saw the video, or remember the scandal from 2011, will use it as proof that reviewers are cowardly or malicious or trying to take down games or whatever. Most of the allegations involve the publisher themselves threatening to do things to reviewers, or employees posting user reviews. These don't show any kind of malicious intent by game reviewers. There is a single point about European reviewers who accepted ad buys in exchange for positive reviews, which if true is shitty. But the European reviewers mentioned in the Destructoid article say they've had negative associations with Topware, and one even speaks of being blacklisted by Topware because of a negative review. As far as I know, none of these allegations have been proven true, but even if they are hardly proof of an industry-wide conspiracy to ruin games with wokeness. As I've said, one of the other more common comments I received was that woke games spend more time concerned with making the game woke than they do with making it fun, and while I did address that in the video, I think it's the closest to an actual critique, and the reason I wanted to make this video. So obviously, it took me 15 minutes to actually get to this point. There's a disillusionment happening with games and the people who play them. It seems like every game, AAA games anyway, feel like every game that came before it, and that doesn't just mean sequels. A Ubisoft open world game feels like an Insomniac open world game, feels like a Bethesda open world game, and so on. Also, I do like Ghost of Tsushima, so I'm not blind to the appeal. But when it comes to AAA games, the games where the real money is, very little of that money is used for actual innovation. Once the formula works, vultures swoop in and repeat that formula to death with very few meaningful changes. As we speak, every publisher is trying to find the next Balatro. Thanks again to Stephanie Sterling for pointing out that this is an impossible task. Part of Balatro's charm was that it was created by people who really wanted to make it. Chasing the trend means new games chasing Balatro's success are being made, or at least funded, by people who really want to make more money. It's only a matter of time before we see a free-to-play Balatro Lake replete with microtransactions, but I digress. When that's all you're doing, when your only goal is to make money, then your designs are made to be addicting, not fun. Don't get me wrong, addicting things can be fun, but also, just because something's addicting doesn't necessarily mean it is fun. So let's take a closer look at some of these trends the big companies have been chasing. After the success of World of Warcraft, every publisher wanted in on the monthly subscription model, As far as I know, only Final Fantasy XIV and to a lesser extent 11 have been all that successful at this. More often, a game will launch with a monthly subscription, then pivot to free-to-play with microtransactions when it doesn't work out. Then there's Fortnite Battle Royale. This enormously popular game has been running strong for quite a few years, and so many publishers have tried to release their own free-to-play shooters. While some of them have been successful in their own right, there are countless other projects that publishers have spent ridiculous amounts of money on, and eventually had to basically throw that money away when their games weren't successful. Concord is the most recent example I can think of. Then there's the open world trend. Not sure what started it, but I think Oblivion is a good guess, maybe Grand Theft Auto 3, depending on your definition of open world. The idea that you could pretty much explore anywhere at the word go. Unlike the previous two examples, this model isn't necessarily a live service, so it seems to have fared a little better, but lately there seems to be what's been dubbed open world fatigue, and so these types of games aren't always selling like they're meant to. That may be because games like Breath of the Wild and Elden Ring have presented much more immersive open worlds than the Ubisoft CD Projekt Red Guerrilla Games style of jamming maps with points of interest that make exploring an open world feel like filling out a checklist. Again, I love Witcher 3, but the question marks that litter the map are the worst part of that game. I mean, what game am I describing here? While the story can be compelling at times, the overwhelming inclusion of countless samey open-world activities means that story can suffer from pacing issues, and fatigue can set in at or even before the halfway point. Am I talking about Horizon Zero Dawn or Forbidden West, Star Wars Outlaws, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, The Witcher 3, Ghost of Tsushima, Starfield, or something else entirely? In an effort to create games that keep players coming back to purchase DLCs, cosmetics, loot boxes, and battle passes, the push has been to create games with more content, with little effort given to how engaging or important that content is. Is it fun to check every corner of an open world for some collectible coin with possibly negligible effects on gameplay that definitely have diminishing returns? Probably not, but it can pad the length of your game by a few hours. And there it is. When it doesn't matter what the content is that keeps players coming back, then that content doesn't need to be engaging or innovative. And that's a damn good reason for why AAA games all feel the same now. But these huge studios, they have to make bland games with hours and hours of content for the sake of content. They have to because so many people are working on these projects for so long that, like Veilguard, 1.5 million players isn't enough to be considered successful. So every AAA game that comes out these days is all or nothing. And even when a game is successful, that's no guarantee that a bunch of people won't be fired anyway. Marvel Rivals, anyone? And if it's all or nothing, what are the chances you're going to take big risks? No, you're going to stick with what's tried and true. Because the people making the big decisions of these games are not the developers. I'm sure they get some say, but ultimately, some finance guy or whatever who's only concerned with the numbers going up is going to come in and insist the game has, daily login rewards for a single-player game. Then all of a sudden, designers have to create mechanics and items to justify that. And that sucks. Because time and time again, independent game designers have proven that there is a wealth of ideas and stories games have yet to explore. Here's some of my favorites from the last few years in no particular order. Papers, Please has an addictive repetitive gameplay loop that nonetheless hooks me in and has something to say about the authoritarian government. The sexy Brutale? I don't know how to pronounce it. But it's a mystery game with a time loop mechanic that's engaging and thoughtful, and actually makes me feel smart when I figure something out. I liked all the Amnesia games, but Amnesia the Bunker married the hide-and-seek mechanics of previous games with a gun, and it adds so much. That doesn't sound new, but it's not a shooter, and the gun can be used for so much more than murder. The Case of the Golden Idol tells a gripping mystery that encourages players to really examine each of the meticulously crafted scenes. Phasmophobia basically spawned a new genre of ghost-identifying games, and, as far as I'm concerned, is still the best of them. Anatomy is a short, terrifying game with so many ideas crammed into it that I try to get people to play it by just saying it's worth experiencing just to see what's possible in a game. Florence does such a good job of marrying gameplay with story that in a very short time of knowing these people, I felt emotionally exhausted in a good way. Tales of Majile is one of the few roguelites I actually liked. There's something so rewarding about finally making good progress as you slowly unravel its systems. I don't hate roguelites and lights, by the way, I just don't think they're for me. Teardown is probably the best iteration of heist planning and execution I've seen in a game. It's stressful in the best way. Mouthwashing is revelatory. Its mystery unravels in ways that make you question all your assumptions. Type Help is a free, text-only mystery game that answers the questions it poses slowly, and I couldn't look away for its entire runtime, around 3 or 4 hours. There's obviously a lot more than that, and those are mostly popular examples. I'd love if I had the time to check out more obscure examples, but the popular examples work best here, because they're proof that innovative games with a smaller scope can still be successful. You don't need hundreds of employees working over the course of several years to make games, so the expectations on release aren't astronomical. And once again, I didn't have to mention wokeness at all. It's almost like whether a game is woke or not has no bearing on whether a game is good. Don't get me wrong, I love to see games with stories that tackle weighty issues in thoughtful ways, but I enjoy games that don't do that too. Of the games I mentioned, I could see Papers, Please, Golden Idol, Florence, and Mouthwashing being labeled woke, and developers here could handle their woke themes while also making a good game. Even when a game has a regressive developer behind it, I won't buy it because I don't want to support that person, not because the game is bad. It might be, but I'll never know. Last video used Obsidian Entertainment's Avowed as a kind of glue. Since then, the game has been released, and I love it. I know full well that it will not be the game of the year 2025. I know even more now because, since I've written it and recorded this, it didn't win. Though, Avowed might have been my game. I wrote that line before Clair Obscur Expedition 33 came out, and I wrote that about Clair Obscur before Silent Hill F came out. Avowed reviewed fairly well, averaging about 80 on Metacritic, though I don't really like to use Metacritic for reasons that are beyond the scope of this video. Still though, a lot of people do use the Metacritic score as a gauge for how well the game was reviewed, and it was, according to Obsidian and Microsoft, a success. It wasn't a runaway success by any means, but it was successful enough to justify the relatively small team that worked on it. It tackles themes like imperialism, trauma, religion, environmentalism, and others in mostly interesting ways. And it's just a lot of fun. After my first playthrough as a mage, I played a game on hard difficulty with the HUD turned off, and it adds new layers to combat. I might review it at some point, but it's a game that I waited years to play and was largely satisfied with the overall experience. According to a Eurogamer article, Obsidian's team isn't aiming for blockbuster status. Rather, their focus is releasing games of broadly the same scope and ambition at a reasonable price, with reasonable expectations for their success, and in doing so, hoping to retain and build their staff's expertise so you can maintain that reasonable success over time. A philosophy at odds with almost the entirety of this industry, or at least with its leadership. We know that because we're still in the middle of 2 years and counting's worth of brutal, relentless layoffs, even at the studios behind games that have done incredibly well. And I think Obsidian is also a great example to point out not just for this comparatively healthy mindset, but also because they have released games that have gone on to be considered blockbusters. Fallout New Vegas had sold around 12 million copies by 2015, and South Park Stick of Truth was estimated to have sold 5 million by 2016. I'm sure those numbers have gone up significantly since then. As I write this, Assassin's Creed Shadows is releasing. Like Avowed and others, anti-DEI people were yelling about the inclusion of historical black samurai Yasuke as a playable character in a series that has always used history as a kind of starting point for the story. But obviously it was not completely based on fact. The comments are what you'd expect from straight-up blatant racism to racism hidden behind qualifiers and long screeds to try and sound more intellectual. Now that the game is out, I'm sure everyone will be rational about it. Really though, Ubisoft has a plan in place to deal with harassment from fans, which, good for them. I can't say I agree with much Ubisoft has done for quite a while now, but this I stand behind. However, I know I'm not going to buy the game. For years now, I have refused to give Ubisoft any money, and while I was tempted to possibly change my mind with Shadows, I learned from Mortismal Gaming that this single-player game has microtransactions. And apparently one of the things you can purchase is something that will mark your map with points of interest that don't get marked when you get to a high spot. I forget what they're called. So, they take something away from you so they can charge you extra for it. But okay, this isn't a review of a game I haven't played. Rather, I just wanted to mention it because quite a bit of what I've seen about the game mentions how Ubisoft is betting everything on this game. If it doesn't perform well, what does that mean for the people employed by Ubisoft? Also, while I'm sure quite a few people feel the same way I do about Ubisoft, there's also people who will point to Shadow's wokeness for its failure. Cue the "it's not wokeness but historical accuracy" comments. And let me just say here, if Shadows fails, it's because it's yet another open-world game with checklist objectives and microtransactions, and from what I read in reviews, it doesn't look like it does anything particularly new besides looking really good. Since I wrote this, Shadows came out and performed well, so I guess wokeness isn't a killing blow this time around. So this is a plea. Stop listening to the screamers about pronouns and body types and black samurais. You're right to recognize the lack of innovation in games, and to be tired of pretty open worlds devoid of personality. But the causes of these issues in games is more complicated than diverse protagonists or progressive themes. As soon as the 1% found out video games could make a lot of money, they spent years examining spreadsheets and attending conferences about how to squeeze every penny out of their fanbase and what practices yielded the most desirable results. These are not people who love to play video games. They're people who love to make money, who just want to make the numbers go up. But the numbers can't always go up. Infinite growth is impossible, but they still chase it. And when the numbers don't go up, or even if they do but not enough, the people who are hurt are the ones who just need a paycheck, not the people at the top making the decisions. And instead of innovating new ideas for games and encouraging creativity, the people in charge chase a trend until it's a shadow of what it once was. But that's not who the anti-woke mob goes after. They attack the individual employees, maybe the head of a department, like an art director or narrative lead. And while those people do have a little more say than most individual employees, they're also probably not the ones obsessed with making sure players have something to do every 30 seconds, or pulling to include some kind of monetization. In other words, the people who receive the brunt of online harassment campaigns are usually just people who really want to make good games, but are subject to the whims of shareholders who really want to make a lot more money than they did last quarter. Returning to Veilguard for a second, in a massive show of cruelty, quite a few gamers celebrated the layoffs of BioWare staff after the game's release. Having to research this stuff led me to some truly heinous comments from people who purport to love games, reveling in the fact that so many people lost their livelihoods. In their eyes, the people who lost their jobs deserved it because they made a game that certain people didn't like. Remember, when new AAA games do contain something innovative or groundbreaking, it's because of those developers, not the people at the top. And no, this doesn't mean I want more people to harass CEOs. You don't have to like woke games, but I guarantee you that wokeness in games is not the reason so many games are uninspired or considered failures. Unrealistic expectations of infinite growth, and unwillingness to innovate, and shareholders expecting every game to be a blockbuster are. When you put all those things together, you can pick one from any number of failed games and point to something that caused its failure. But if you don't acknowledge that a game can sell multiple million copies and still be considered a failure, you're not actually examining the causes. At that point, anything that turns off a few possible players could be enough for it to dip below the success threshold. But games shouldn't have to be for everybody. I'm not talking about accessibility here either. It would be great if every game was possible to be played by everybody. What I mean is, not everybody should want to play every game. But when you pour so much money, people, and resources into a single game, you basically require that the game appeals to everybody. And that means the game will have nothing to say. Because if you have something to say, loud people are going to loudly yell at you, or worse. And if a game has nothing to say, whether that's a political statement or innovative mechanics, how could it be in any way interesting? At its worst, a woke game should simply be ignored by some people who don't want to engage with its ideas. There's no need for the regressive screamers to shit out countless videos about the death of the games industry because the Oblivion remaster uses body type in its character creator and not male-female. Don't get me wrong, the games industry is in a bad place, but that's not because games developers, journalists, and publishers have gone woke. It's because of the awful business practices that demand infinite growth, and so expectations for sales are so often impossible to reach. Maybe a bunch of angry gamers refusing to buy a game because of perceived wokeness is enough to cause a game to be considered a failure. But that's only because these games have astronomical sales expectations to begin with. And please, don't come at me with this and that woke game failed, and that proves games that go woke go broke. We could go back and forth forever about woke games that succeeded and failed. Wokeness is irrelevant. I hope I've shown that. It's nice to have an easy cause, but few things do. In an industry that has increasingly tried every sneaky trick in the book to squeeze more dimes out of its customers. An industry that has created work environments that ignore the mental health of employees by creating conditions where they are consistently overworked and feel no job security even in studios that are doing well. And an industry that chases trends rather than innovates seems a much more likely cause. But that's not as satisfying as pointing to a single thing you personally don't like. It's not as punchy to write long articles and create long videos trying to break this stuff down as it is to yell about body types. But I implore you to stop being satisfied with easy answers. Because while it's true that the games industry is a hellscape right now, there is much more at stake than games if we stop looking for answers when we hear the yellers and their too easy causes. Thank you for watching. This has taken me way too long to put together. It's to the point where I have no idea if the script is good or the arguments flow well, as always, but especially because of that, I welcome any constructive criticism. I love games, I really do. And I want there to be more innovation in game mechanics and more thoughtful exploration of themes in game stories. Recently I've been replaying Morrowind, as I hear many are, some for the first time. It's such a great feeling to pick up a game you remember so fondly and to find that it really is as good as you remember. For releases from this year, I've also played Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, Blueprints, Avowed, and Chronos The New Dawn, and Silent Hill F. All these games were great experiences with new ideas and intriguing stories, and I'm so happy they were able to break through the noise of AAA releases and get some recognition. I'm sure I've missed some smaller games that I'd love, and I wish I had the time to look for deeper cuts. But I'm happy for these games that were made because people wanted to make a game, not just make a lot of money. If you feel like this video was worth your time, feel free to comment, like, and/or subscribe. And if you feel like doing more than that, I have a Ko-fi link in the description to give me a tip. Even if you do none of these things, though, thanks so much for sticking around to the end and listening to what I have to say. Thanks again, and I hope to see you again for more sentences and paragraphs.